أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's topic will center around global issues from African American perspectives. For the conversation, we have two outstanding brothers, Amir Abdul Malik Ali of Oakland, California, and Brother Malik Aziz of Tampa, Florida. Let me also note that we are at the end of the month of January, about to enter the month of February. These 2 months back to back, January and February, are quite significant symbols of African American struggle. The reason being, January is the birth month of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the only African American to have a national holiday and also a monument on Monument Row in Washington, D.C. He was a trailblazing, quote unquote, civil rights figure who, before he was assassinated, had grown into a human rights perspective. Just an outstanding figure, someone who many people identify with around the world. And he is also someone whose history has been to a great degree distorted by the establishment. Many people are of the view, especially young people, that Dr. King was assassinated shortly after he delivered his speech in 1963, I Have a Dream, on the monument grounds. The fact of the matter is that Dr. King lived another 5 years. He was assassinated in 1968. And in that 5-year interval, he grew tremendously in terms of his worldview. And what is also not discussed by the establishment is the fact that in that final year of Dr. King's life, from 1967, from April, in fact, 4th of 1967 to April 4th of 1968, when he when he was assassinated. In April of 1967, he delivered this groundbreaking speech at Riverside Church in New York City, time to break the silence on Vietnam. And this was a courageous address by Dr. King that ultimately led to the severing of ties with him and many within the establishment, including many within the civil rights movement. He became, to a great extent, isolated in that final year of his life. This is something that is not as widely known and discussed as it should be. But he was a very courageous man. He was a man that stood on principle, who stood on his faith, and who stood up for what was right. And he ultimately became a martyr as a result. So anyway, again, January is the month of celebration of Dr. King and his legacy, much of what he struggled for. And then we go right from January into February, Black History Month, which symbolizes, of course, the African American struggle on so many fronts, including the human rights front. And so today's discussion with these two respected and very knowledgeable brothers, these two knowledgeable guests of mine, two brothers I'm proud to call friends and brothers in Islam. We're going to have a substantive conversation, inshallah ta'ala. So without any further ado, let's bring them on. Brother Amir Abdul Malik Ali and Brother Malik Aziz. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Good to see the brothers.
All right. Are you hearing me all right, Brother Malik?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, the first thing I want to do is this. Given the fact that I want the two of you to share an opening thought, whatever that thought is. I want you to share an opening thought for a minute or two, and then we're going to go to a piece of video, two pieces of video, in fact, that factors into one of the issues that I know will be a hot topic of discussion between us, what's going on right now in occupied Palestine. But before we get to those two short videos, I want you all to open with whatever thought you have on this topic of focus for today. The global issues from African American perspectives. Let's begin with you, Amir Abdul Malik Ali.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. I remember what they call Malcolm's final speech, which was the day after his house was bombed. It wasn't actually his final speech, but in that speech, very, very important speech. But one of the things he said in that speech was he talked about how outside of the Western House, people of color were rising up all over the world. And then inside the Western House, there was a rising number of people of color, and how the white man, if you will, the system was concerned about that, right? Now, all you have to do is erase people of color and put Muslim in there, right? Because most Muslims are people of color anyway. And so now we have a situation where here's the United States that is basically declaring war on the axis of Islamic resistance. This is not like a phony type Islamic groups. This is the axis of Islamic resistance: Hamas, Hezbollah, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and so on and so forth. So now the United States is declaring war on the actual axis of Islamic resistance outside of the West. Inside the West, the fastest growing religion inside the West is Islam, right? And so now there's implications, major implications for this. It's one thing to deal with, like I said, with phony Islamic groups. It's a total other thing to deal with the actual Islamic resistance, right? The center of which, of course, is Palestine. So this is serious implications for Muslims in the West, and then specifically implicate the role of the African American Muslim. This is very, very critical. You know what I'm saying? Because as African American Muslims, we're supposed to be on the forefront as to what's coming. But when you see the lack of African American Muslims who are coming out and raising their voice against what's happening in Palestine, this is something that's a cause for concern. And so we have some difficult days ahead. But at the same time, though, we have Allah and we have a history of struggle, right? We're used to this climate. But the question is, are African American Muslims ready or getting ready for what's coming upon us?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for that opening statement, my brother. What say you, Brother Malik Aziz?
Yeah, to Brother Amir's point, in the Tribune of Chicago, which is the standard conservative newspaper in Chicago, in May of 1990, the headlines on the front page was America has a new enemy, Islam. And subsequent to that, Gulf War #1, Gulf War #2, Obama's onslaught with drones, Biden's re-interaction with war against the Muslims as soon as he got to office, indicates that this war against the Muslims has been going on for quite some time. All right. Our response to that, as Brother Emir pointedly said, has at least coming from the militant radical tradition wing of the Black liberation struggle in America, which largely prior to that has been at the core that have been Muslims in terms of our consciousness, in terms of the activity. We've gotten away from that radical tradition of struggle, the radical tradition of Malcolm X, the radical tradition of what happened at post-Malcolm at the BLA, where Muslims, Darob bin Wahad, Assata Shakur, Sundiata Acoli, all political prisoners because of that radical tradition. They took up the mantle of that, right? Unfortunately, and Daroba bin Wahad has said this, Omali Yashatilla of Uhuru has said this, that we were defeated in the early 1970s, meaning the Black Power movement and the Black liberation struggle. We must now focus on core messages of these groups and these individuals in order to resurrect the Black liberation struggle. Vis-a-vis what's going on in the world today with the attack on the Muslims and this realignment that's going on worldwide. Lastly, I would say this, that it's been a failure and of two, to Brother Amir's point, the absence of the radical tradition inside of Black Muslim territory in the United States. It's been the absence of largely two groups subsequent to this Palestinian genocide. One is the Nation of Islam under the leadership of Minister Louis Farrakhan. I think that I will give him a pass in that he launched a significant lawsuit against Jewish organizations in this country, Zionist organizations, for slander against him and the Nation of Islam. So a message must have went out for his body politic to stand down on commenting on this genocide, because I have not seen enough voices come out of that. The second group that largely entails Black Muslims and is the followers of Imam Wardi Muhammad. They have been embroidered for decades in this fallacy of religious integration and coalitions. You know, we all the same, that kind of stuff. And so you see them, sending their kids and children into the United States military, supporting the American flag and all that it stands for, making a claim that the United States Constitution was built on Islam, when in fact we know historically, I, as a letter historian, know, and anybody who takes a cursory glance, including Stevie Wonder, knows that the core of the Constitution is based on slavery and oppression. The last note I will make on that, if white liberalism couldn't solve our problems 40 years ago with Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Kennedy as that line, it has definitely failed to solve our problems in terms of building any kind of coalitions with the white liberal establishment, even around this Palestinian issue. Because at the end of the day, they support white power, and we can look at that from President Clinton to Barack Obama, and now President Biden, the support of the Zionist state and oppression.
Okay, got off to a really thought-provoking and challenging start. Now what I'd like for us to do is see a couple of videos. The first video is one that I know both of you brothers are familiar with. It's going to bring back some warm memories. Not long after our esteemed revolutionary African elder Nelson Mandela was released from political imprisonment in South Africa. He came to the United States, and he was feted like a prince, even by up on Capitol Hill, in that same house, congressional house that that castigated him and justified his imprisonment. I mean, all of a sudden, once he was released, he came here like, and was welcomed as the surviving prince of struggle that he was. But during that first visit to the United States, there was a town hall meeting that was held in New York City. I'll never forget it. It was huge, and it was moderated by Ted Koppel. What I'd like for us to do at now is see, just a couple of clips, 2 or 3 clips from that town meeting, about 10 minutes worth of visual historical record, and then right behind that, we're going to show a very recent clip of a South African Jewish activist who was one of the soldiers, all right, under the leadership of Mandela. And he has some very interesting things to say about what is taking place right now in Gaza, the International Court of Justice's case. I mean, he has some interesting thoughts to share. So we're going to see these 2 pieces of video back to back, and then we're going to come back to you, brothers. All right, let's see it, Brother Sadiq.
Yasser Arafat, Colonel Gaddafi, Fidel Castro support our struggle to the hilt. They do not support it only in rhetoric. They are placing resources at our disposal for us to win the struggle. That is the position.
Mr. Mandela, as I mentioned to you before the program, we also have some distinguished guests sitting behind us, one of whom, Mr. Henry Sigmund, together with 2 other Jewish leaders, came to Geneva to visit with you precisely because they were so concerned not only by the kind of thing that you just said before the break with regard to Yasser Arafat, with regard to Libya's Colonel Gaddafi, but also because of the support that you seemed at different times to give to the PLO. I would like to ask Mr. Sigmund to stand now for a moment and pose whatever question he would like directly to you. Mr. Sigmund?
I think I would be dishonest if I did not express profound disappointment with the answer that Mr. Mandela gave to the previous question, because it suggests a certain degree of amorality.
As far as Yasser Arafat is concerned, I explained to Mr. Sigmund that we identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
Mr. Mandela, we have ripped through the first part of this broadcast extraordinarily quickly. There are still a number of issues that we have to take up with Mr. Mandela, not the least of them being sanctions by the United States against South Africa. We will continue with that in the Nightline segment of this broadcast. Just a quick break now. We'll be back. And we are back once again at the City College of New York with Nelson Mandela. And Mr. Mandela, we have just heard a number of the things that you said in our hour between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock this evening. Some controversial things, not the kinds of things necessarily that a very political man says. If you were very political, you might have been more concerned about not alienating some people in this country who have it within their hands, within their power, either to continue sanctions against South Africa or to raise those sanctions, to lift them. Why were you not a little more political? Perhaps we're too accustomed to politicians in this country.
I do not understand what you mean. Perhaps if you clarify what you are referring to, I may be in a position to comment.
What I'm saying is that in this country, for example, there has been for many years a close alliance between the Jewish population and the black population in the civil rights struggle. There is likely to be a rather negative reaction to some of the things that you have said. That reaction could very well cause people to call up their congressmen, their senators, and say, go ahead, lift the sanctions. Why not? After all, President de Klerk is doing a great deal against apartheid. Only today, in fact, his number 2 man, Gerrit Viljoen, said that the government perceives itself in South Africa as being part of the anti-apartheid struggle.
As far as the Jewish question to begin with, I have had discussions at my own initiative with prominent Jewish leaders to straighten out this affair. Amongst the people I saw was Mrs. Helen Suzman, who has been an MP in our country for more than 30 years. There was Mr. Mazens, who has been a judge in Lesotho, Botswana, and the old Rhodesia. There was the chief rabbi of Johannesburg. There was Professor Katz from the University of Witwatersrand, and an eminent community leader in South Africa. We discussed this question and all misunderstanding was cleared, the question of Yasser Arafat and the PLO. I have also discussed the question with the Jewish leaders in the USA and very top people like Mr. Sigmund. We reached an agreement on this question and we saw eye to eye. Now, I don't know where your concern arises. The Jewish leaders themselves are able to determine their own affairs. Nobody else is entitled to say that the Jewish leaders are going to be concerned about your stand. Because I have had the discussions with them, and those discussions will reach consensus. But there are matters, of course, in which we did not agree. But the position which we take as the ANC, I thought we were able to explain it in such a way that it removed the concern of the Jewish community.
Let's broaden it out.
I am still prepared to do that even in this talk. If the Jewish leader have any doubts about our stand, I am prepared to address them and to allay their concern, because they are a very important community both in South Africa and, of course, in the States. And I'm prepared to iron out any differences that might exist. But they must know what our stand is. Arafat is a comrade in arms, and we treat him as such. We have many Jews, members of the Jewish community in our struggle, and they have occupied very top positions. But that does not mean to say that the enemies of Israel are our enemies. We refuse to take that position. You can call it being political or a moral question, but for anybody who changes his principles depending on whom he is dealing, that is not a man who can lead a nation. Apparently, Mr. Coppel, you have not listened to my argument. If you have done so, then you have not been serious in examining it. I have replied to one of our friends here that I have refused to be drawn into the differences that exist between various communities inside the USA. You have not commented that I am going to offend anybody by refusing to involve myself in the internal affairs of the USA, of the USA.
Okay, brothers, we had a little bit of a mishap there. The video didn't start exactly where it was supposed to start, but we did get most of what I wanted you and the audience to see. It started out with one of the Jewish leaders in the audience standing up and being allowed to make an observation. He made a critique of Nelson Mandela, the ANC, the ANC's associations with the PLO, Yasser Arafat specifically, Muammar Gaddafi, and Fidel Castro. And that memorable line of Nelson Mandela in his response was, one of the mistakes that folks represented by voices like this Jewish leader in the audience make, is thinking that their enemies should be our enemies. And he got a tremendous ovation from the audience in response to that observation. Now, with that said, what I want to do now is, before we bring our brothers back into the picture, I want to go to the other video, the video of the ally, the Jewish ally of Nelson Mandela, who just a few days ago gave a critique on the genocide that's taking place in occupied Palestine, most importantly in Gaza. Listen to what he had to say. Play that video, please, Brother Sadiq.
My name is Andrew Feinstein. I'm a former ANC Member of Parliament from South Africa. I served under Nelson Mandela from the time of our first democratic election in 1994, after we had been liberated from the system of apartheid. I'm also Jewish. I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. My mother survived the war in occupied Vienna itself. And I was speaking here today about why it is that South Africa have taken Israel to the International Court of Justice. Because I think it's particularly symbolic that it is South Africa, because South Africa knows what apartheid is. We had apartheid in our country for 350 years. And my former boss, Nelson Mandela, and my friend and political mentor, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, both described Israel as an apartheid state, and they knew better than anyone I've ever met what an apartheid state is. And they were very critical of apartheid of apartheid Israel, because apartheid Israel was a very close ally of apartheid South Africa. They helped each other become nuclear powers, to develop nuclear weapons. And Archbishop Tutu, when he was asked when he won the Nobel Peace Prize why he is so critical of Israel, he said, I am critical of a country that was complicit with my oppressor, who helped my oppressor oppress me for many, many years. So I think it's incredibly important that South Africa has brought this case to the International Court of Justice, describing what is happening in Gaza as a genocide of the Palestinian people. And it's absolutely clear from the South African document, which is an extraordinary legal document, that this is a genocide, both in terms of the conduct of the Israeli operation in Gaza and because of the intent that has been voiced by Israeli politicians to remove all Palestinians from Gaza and for Israel to effectively take over Gaza completely. A population, in South Africa it was the black African population, in Israel, Palestine it is the Palestinian population, are not treated equally under the law. Even Palestinian citizens of Israel have lesser rights than Jewish citizens of Israel. So they're being discriminated against simply on the basis of their race, ethnicity, or religion. The second thing is that what apartheid South Africa did is they tried to break the black African population into what they called little homelands or Bantustans, little territories that were not connected to each other, in much the same way as Israel in its occupation of the occupied territories has inserted Israeli settlements and separated bits of Gaza, the West Bank, Hebron, Ramallah from each other, so that there is no possible two-state solution, is very similar to the apartheid system of Bantustans. And then most importantly, both Israel and South Africa have used brutal military force to oppress those populations that they see as somehow inferior to themselves, which is a system of racism. So by all of those similarities, Israel is an apartheid system according to the Rome Statute of International Law. The most important difference, though, is that apartheid South Africa was very dependent on the black African community for its economy as a workforce, whereas Israel isn't very reliant on Palestinians for its economy. And that is one of the reasons why Israel has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, innocent Palestinian civilians, in this way. They don't want them, they don't need them. And that has made Israeli apartheid far more brutal than anything we saw or experienced in South Africa.
Yes, indeed it has. And you know, I remember Nelson Mandela and later being in the audience in fact, not just in the audience, I later had a one-on-one face-to-face conversation with the late South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu. May Allah be pleased with both of them. When he, echoing what Nelson Mandela had said, stated that the apartheid that their Palestinian brothers and sisters are experiencing is worse than the apartheid that was experienced by us, we black South Africans. They said it was worse. And again, I was, I heard Nelson Mandela say this it was either, I don't recall if it was in a speech or in an interview, but I remember him saying it. And in the case of Desmond Tutu, he and I, we were together at an outstanding program in Boston at the Old South Church, one of the oldest religious institutions in the United States, goes all the way back to the revolutionary days of America, the Old South Church. And I think it was the Sabile Conference. I believe it was the Sabile. They held a conference on Palestine, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu was the keynote speaker. And Amir Abdul Malik and Brother Aziz, I remember, how impressed I was with the conference. I mean, there were people that came from all over the country. There were also folk that came from different parts of the world for this conference. It went over. It was like a 2-day conference, but I also remember, and this stands out for me to this day, there was a huge demonstration outside of the church, a huge demonstration that was led It was organized and led by the Zionists in Greater Boston. Not just Jewish Zionists, Christian Zionists. I mean, that was my first time experiencing the American impact of Christian Zionism. There were Christian and Jewish Zionists. It was a huge demonstration. And one of the things that really offended me, was that some of them had these large placards with the image of Dr. Martin Luther King on it, and with with a message. I forgot exactly what the message was, but a message that gave the impression that Dr. King, was okay with apartheid Israel. Now, the fact of the matter is, we know that back in the 60s, the nature of apartheid Zionist Israel was not as clear, not even nearly as clear as it is today. We also know that not just well-meaning Jewish activists, but those who came with sinister agendas, the Zionists within the Jewish community, had insinuated themselves within the civil rights struggle through money, through making donations, bankrolling organizations like the NAACP, CORE, and some of the others. And with those donations, there were strings attached. They were calling shots. We know that Dr. King was not as aware of as Malcolm was. He didn't have the worldview as of yet in the early stages of his civil rights work that Malcolm had. But later he did come to it. And I have no doubt in my mind, no doubt whatsoever, that if Dr. King, the Dr. King of the late 1960s, if he were alive today, witnessing what apartheid South Africa, apartheid Israel has become in its fullness, I know what side of the line Dr. King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be on. And so for that reason, like I said, when I saw that placards with those images of Dr. King on it, with a message that implied, that insinuated that, he was all right with apartheid Israel. He was a supporter of apartheid Israel. I was deeply offended. Mm-hmm. What say you, brothers?
Mm-hmm. I think they did. I think they tried to do the same thing recently with respect to Gaza, and I think his youngest daughter came out.
Yes, she did.
She came out and she said, "No, right? Don't." I'm paraphrasing her. Don't associate my father and his legacy with what's taking place over there.
That's right.
And I also remember Imam Musa a while ago saying that when he was in prison, he heard an excerpt of a speech, late 60s, Dr. King's speech, where Dr. King came out against, came out in support of the struggles of brothers in Palestine. He said when he got out of prison, he was looking for that recording and could never find it. So I think that's interesting as well. So yeah, I think there's that tendency, what you said, brother, that, in the early days of Dr. King, I'm saying that he was, he didn't have that worldview yet. Yes. But of course, late 60s, Dr. King, oh yeah, no question. Just like what Bernice said not too long ago, do not associate Dr. King with what's taking place over there.
Mm-hmm. Brother Aziz?
Yeah, just a couple takeaways from Nelson Mandela's presentation. One would be what is complicated the context of struggle and methodology that brought down, as you can remember, brothers, helped bring down apartheid South Africa in the late 1980s, was the disinvestment movement, right? Mm-hmm. Did you know that nearly 40 states in the United States have signed a anti-BDS legislation
Right.
This is significant. That is not even to say corporate structures as well as the educational institutions here in the United States through the billionaire donor situation for Harvard and other places like that have been forced to sign BDS legislation within their own university. So this is very complicated. So the Zionists obviously saw what brought down South Africans apartheid. So let's get out in front of this investment, which isolated the South African government, the apartheid South African government in the late 1980s before the entire world. So this is significant. The other thing that I want to unpack as we talk about solutions, and Nelson Mandela spoke to this. He mentions the name of Arafat and Gaddafi. One thing that we have to be concerned about, again, these people, they look forward, right? And they structurally look at it like a flow chart. If A doesn't work, then over here is B. B doesn't work, then we shift into C. So they've mapped this thing all the way out, all 26 alphabets. And one of the things that they've mapped out is how, if they lose this situation in Gaza, which they cannot win, all right? They've already lost because they've been exposed before the world, and there's no putting those clothes back on. So as they map out next steps, one of the things that they're going to try to co-opt is the next set of activities that they, meaning the United States as well as Zionist Israel, of what new Palestine should look like. So from a neo-colonialist perspective, they will try to pick the next leadership. Mahmoud Abbas, who has been a contractor for Zionist Israel, is going to be presented, talking to the world as, this is a moderate, this is somebody that we can work with. We want peace. No. We don't want peace. We want the end to the occupation, right? We're not, even though Nelson Mandela was the head of state, he has to be pragmatic. Revolutionaries are not pragmatic, okay? We want the return of pre-1948. And unless we think like that, we will lose the chess game. The last thing I would say that Nelson Mandela spoken to was this question of Pan-Africanism around this issue in Palestine. As we talk about next steps and solutions, Muammar Gaddafi talked about the United States of Africa, and even not only the now 55 countries on the African continent as this sort of super league of Africa, but also he divided the whole world, the African diaspora, into 7 regions. And I think that the North America was the 6th region, where the entire diaspora being involved in the flourish of Africa, the protection of Africa, and as such, the protection of the Palestinians, as we, as the new leadership, Brother El-Hajj, because there's a vacuum in Black leadership, right? And we failed to transition Black leadership over 15, 20 years ago, and it's left a hole, right? So as we look at our next steps, in terms of building the necessary coalitions, I propose that as we look at the American domestic election coming up in November 2024, the Muslims clearly exited the Democratic Party. So as a result of that, we should revisit what happened in 1972 in Gary, the Independent Black Political Party, which mainly focused on a Black Power agenda to include the Palestinians as the most militant voices amongst the Muslim diaspora vis-a-vis the issue that's going on with the genocide in Gaza. This would be mind-blowing. Once, if we could form that coalition, that revisiting the one line movement, I think that we are carving the pathway for international liberation of not only the African masses, but also those in the Middle East.
Interesting thought, my brother, and definitely one that is deserving of a deeper conversation and exploration. What you just said, coupled with what you said earlier, the critique you made about some of our African American brethren, and the shortcomings in the positions that many of them are taking, it reminded me of something that just happened a few days ago with me. It happened a few days ago. There's this WhatsApp group called My Muslim Brothers WhatsApp, and it has a good number of members, and I'm kind of assuming that all of them are brothers, Muslim brothers from different walks of life, from different parts of the world, from different tribes. What happened with me around this issue of the upcoming elections is very instructive. It as a reflection of where we are communally and the work that we need to do on ourselves. There was this ongoing back and forth involving a number of members of the group, including myself, on the upcoming elections, and a debate that was centered around whether to vote for Biden or to vote for Trump. All right. The lesser of evils, which constitutes the lesser of evils. And of course, my position has been, and will continue to be, no Biden, no Trump. We should not vote for either one of these devils.
Yes.
No Biden, no Trump. Now, I'm not arguing that we should not be involved in the electoral system, that we should, remove ourselves from the system. No, this is, from my humble perspective, one of the instruments that we can use to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. But we have got to approach it in a deeply thoughtful and strategic way. And the beginning premise for the upcoming 2024 elections, no Biden, no Trump. All right. And my argument has also been that what we need to do is to first, no Biden, no Trump is sending a message. It's sending a message. And I believe that Biden critically needs the Muslim vote in order to be able to win, especially some of the key states like Michigan and what have you.
Howard, so let me interject on that point. I'd like you to respond on that Muslim vote issue. Last election, 2020, Biden had 70% of the Muslim vote. 70%. We know that number is in the single digits right now because of him supporting the genocide with American funding.
Mm-hmm.
Again, how do we playbook or map out their attack or their engagement to bring those numbers up? And I'll make the statement and I'll listen to you, brothers. My estimation is they're going to go after the most compromising part of the Muslim American community. Those are the South Asians, right? They're going to play them against the rest of the Muslim community. They have a gentleman by the name of Farouk Minta, who was appointed last election as the liaison to, and he's South Asian, the liaison to the Biden's liaison to the Muslim community. They're going to make a play. So as you talk about the Muslim vote, I just want you to kind of respond in that with that information in that context, and how do you see this playing out?
Well, I agree. I agree that they are going to play as hard as they possibly can. The immigrant Muslim vote, both South Asians and Arabs. Well, it's going to be, of course, they're going to be far more emphasis on the South Asians. Why? Because more of the Arab constituency is inflamed over what is happening right now in occupied Palestine. So yeah, the emphasis is going to be on the South Asian community, on the South Asian players within the Muslim community, and no doubt they're going to use them to the max, the organizations that they represent to the max. But my feeling is that they're not going to be successful on that front.
No.
Now, what I'm concerned about, however, is this. I'm concerned in this lesser of evils psychology, this lesser of evil's ploy that some of us are stuck on, and not just our immigrant brethren, our African American brother. Getting back to this my brother's WhatsApp group, my Muslim brothers WhatsApp group. This was started by African American Muslims. All right. Now, but it is a large group, and it is comprised of Muslims both here and abroad. All right. What happened was, in us going back and forth over days. Now, I didn't ask to be a part of this group. I want to make this very clear. I did not ask to become a part of the group. Someone just put me into the group. And I started seeing the messages. I was seeing the back and forth. There were some stimulating discussions and debate going on regarding the upcoming elections. And I felt not just a need, but an obligation to weigh in with my perspective. All right. My perspective was challenged. Alhamdulillah. And I was glad that it was, because it gave me an opportunity to expound on why my perspective is as it is. I felt that I was winning traction, and then guess what happened? Guess what happened? All of a sudden, your brother Saalakhan is about to respond to someone else's post, and then I find that I had been removed. I had been removed from the group.
You were canceled, brother? You were canceled?
I was canceled. Now, this is the interesting thing, though. I want to see who it was that canceled me. So I started checking to see, okay, who is this connected to this number that canceled me, and this name and number that canceled me? SubhanAllah, brothers, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking.
Did you know the person?
Yeah.
Drum roll.
I knew the brother. I mean, he's a younger brother. I guess he's probably in his 40s. I would say that he's in his 40s. And African American brother. He is someone that grew up in the community that I come from. All right. I began my journey in the nation, came through the World Community of Al-Islam, later the American Muslim Mission under Imam Wahidin Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him.
Ameen.
Came through that community, into, growing into Islam, into the Muslim brother that I am today. Those are my roots. This young brother, when I saw his face, I immediately knew who he was. I didn't recognize him by the name, but when I saw his face, I was surprised. You removed your brother Saalakhan from the group. And subhanAllah, it reminded me, though, however, of how compromised we are. And going to the point that you made earlier, Brother Malik, about the community that comes under the name the Imam Wahidin Muhammad. There are brothers and sisters in that community that are compromised, and there are brothers and sisters who are straight as arrows. We want to make that very clear. In fact, for the past 2 years, your brother Saalakhan, the first Friday of each month, this upcoming Friday, I am the guest khatib for Juma at Masjid Bilal. This is one of the masjids that has, for many, many years, been part of Imam Wathani Muhammad's community. They welcome their brother Saalakhan with a lot of love. They look forward to my visits each month when I come. But masajid like that are far and few between. Many of the masajid and centers that know me well keep me at a distance. They keep Brother Saalakhan at a distance. And this young brother comes from, the community here in Washington, D.C. And I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him any more than what he may end up feeling if he sees this what I'm saying right now. It's not about, just trying to point someone out and embarrass them. This is a principle. And what I want to say to my African American brothers, and there are many in this group, my Muslim brothers group, many of them that I know from different parts of the country. What I want to say to you is that we came through an experience, beginning with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We came through an experience that is very unique for Muslims anywhere in the world. With that experience and having come into true Islam through that experience, we have a responsibility to use the gems that we've acquired from that experience, not for our own aggrandizement, for our self-benefit. I'm quite certain that some of the brothers who have this Biden still kind of mentality, despite him being the genocide Joe that people know him of now, they have this because some of them are either in the government, they want to be in the, or they want to have some lucrative contracts with certain government agencies. Some of them want to be able to travel in and out of the United States without any problems. They're just thinking about themselves. And I'm reminded of what that dialogue that went on between the Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh, and actually the dialogue that went on between Pharaoh and the magicians, when he summoned the magicians to confront Musa. They asked him what will be our reward, and he said, nearness to me. Nearness to me. This is something that is compromises the principles of people of all persuasions throughout the time, since time immemorial, this desire to be close to power and to be willing to do anything, say anything, do anything in order to be able to be close to power. And I'm saying to my brothers, and especially to my African American brothers who came through the same experience that I came through, there is a responsibility we have to that experience. And at the heart of that responsibility is, as Nelson Mandela said in that clip, not to allow yourself to be compromised.
Yes.
Not to allow yourself to be compromised, by anything that can be dangled before you as an enticement for sacrificing your principles and your conscience. What say you, brothers?
I think he knew too that your position was going to gain traction. You know what I'm saying? We're living in a time where many of the positions that many of us have, the people are slowly but surely becoming more receptive to it, right? If people are going to do that whole electoral politics thing, unless they're talking about what Brother Hajj Malik is talking about, an independent party, they're just playing games. They're just playing games. You know what I'm saying? The corrupt rich has the electoral process on lock. And so it would have to be something more independent. If you're going to deal with it, it's got to be more from a more independent posture, And I think that's gaining more and more traction. So that's why, brother, you have to be canceled, right? Because what you're going to be, what you're saying, it's going to catch on. It's going to catch on. We're living in that time period. It's going to catch on. And so there are people who get they feel insecure over that. But unless we're talking independent party, there's no need in us even playing that game. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, my brothers, I just kind of lied. I didn't realize time was going to be going so fast. And what I want to do is, and we have to keep it to 1 minute. What I want to do is allow you, both you brothers, to whatever closing remark you want to make. We had another video that I wanted to show, but we're not going to show that video now. We'll save it for another time. We're going to end with a 1 minute closing remark from both of you brothers, inshallah ta'ala, and then call it a wrap. First, you, brother Aziz, Malik Aziz.
Yeah, so as we look toward next steps, I think a marriage that has to take place is what we've witnessed and what worked in the past that put fear in the hearts and the minds of our enemies, and our enemies being white supremacy and Zionism. That's a collaboration of what happened at the Bend Conference in 1955, the non-alignment movement in 1961, and what happened in Gary in 1972. That the Black suffering leadership in this country creates the marriage between the Palestinian struggle, and we create, just as what Malcolm talked about in his meetings with Gamal Nasser, Ahmed Ben Bella, and the rest of them, a new wave of a truly national and international liberation around it, where we can address all of these issues from an independent perspective.
Okay, alhamdulillah. You, brother Amir Abdul Malik Ali.
And unless we do that, unless we get back to our tradition, so I'm talking about Black folks, African American Muslims, unless we get back to our tradition, then we're going to be disgraced.
Yes.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to replace us. He's going to disgrace us. Now, we have respect all over the world. When they say Americans, you can't go to those places that's dangerous, they're not talking about us. We can go. But if we do not do what we're supposed to be doing, what Brother Hajj Malik was talking about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to disgrace us, then replace us.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Brothers, may Allah ta'ala bless both of you. I'm so glad to have the two of you with me today for this conversation. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue it. There's going to be a part 2 of this conversation. We may add a couple of more voices to the panel, inshallah ta'ala, but we're going to continue this, inshallah. May Allah ta'ala bless the rest of your day. And on that note, we close out as we normally do with Asr.
Hey, Hajj, one thing before, if you do a part 2 of this, make sure you invite the brother, at least make an attempt, the one who canceled you, because that's Kwame Ture talked about this. The duty of the conscious is to raise the level of consciousness amongst the unconscious.
Good nasiha, good nasiha. Inshallah, ta'ala will do.
We don't cancel. Cancel.
That's right. We don't cancel.
We raise.
We don't cancel. We step up.
That's it.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.